Hi everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I'd like to introduce someone special joining me as a co-host for the very first time, and that's Steve Burke. Steve has been part of our team for over a year now, working behind the scenes on various projects. And what you might not know is that Steve has a fascinating background. He studied music and recently completed his bachelor's in physiotherapy. He's now working with SMC Amsterdam, applying his skills to help people improve their physical well-being. I'm thrilled to have Steve here today to bring his unique perspective to our conversation. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Guy.
And today on the podcast, we're going to be talking to Shrey Vazir. Shrey is an advanced physiotherapist and the founder of Mind Body Horizons, a platform dedicated to integrating mindfulness practices into physiotherapy and healthcare. With years of experience helping individuals manage chronic pain, stress, and burnout, Shrey has become a passionate advocate for using mindfulness as a tool to support both patients and healthcare professionals. His holistic approach aims to bridge the gap between physical and mental well-being, providing practical strategies to promote resilience and healing. Hi Shrey, welcome to the pod.
Awesome. Thank you, Kai, for that warm welcome. And thank you, Steve, and both of you and Physiotutors for having me here.
Sure, it's an honor, man. Let's jump right in. Hey, maybe you can share a little bit of your background with us and what inspired you to focus on the intersection of mindfulness and physiotherapy.
Of course. So, maybe I'll say, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a story.
Yeah, go ahead.
When
definitely.
I was 21 years old, I was sent to the emergency department because I had severe back pain, and there was nothing I knew at that time that was happening. At the ER, they did lots of tests. They referred me to a neurologist, a rheumatologist. I ended up doing lots of different exams, CT scans, MRIs over the next couple of months. And at the end of it, the good news was that there was nothing structurally wrong with my back or spine, as we know in physio. And they ended up diagnosing me with fibromyalgia. And at that time, I didn't really know what it was, what was going on. I kind of was in this denial mode that this is not what I have. I continued on. I was in kinesiology at the time, doing my undergrad. And around that time is when I first learned about mindfulness. I never really believed in it at that time, to be very frank with you. But the science was coming out, and I knew there was a thing back then. Fast forward to when I did my physiotherapy, I learned that there was way more to physio than what I initially learned, and I realized at that time there was a lot of research coming out on central sensitization, nociplastic pain, and how physio was kind of at the center stage for managing ways to deal with chronic pain. So, around that time is when I really started to take my health in my own hands, because I realized that there were things that I can do about it. And exercise was a huge part of it. And I remember asking one of my professors in university in physiotherapy. I asked her, what kind of exercises should I do if I have this much pain in my back? And she really just said, do what's tolerable and do what you can. And that kind of like changed it for me. It was sort of like the hurt versus harm principle. And after that, I started exercising way more. My pain was better under control. But it wasn't until I started practicing mindfulness again when I really was able to understand my pain, my whole journey, and cope with it better. So after physiotherapy in university, I actually did training in mindfulness-based chronic pain management at the University of Toronto, as well as Harvard Medical School. I did some further courses. And I realized that there was a lot more to pain than I really realized. And I used to believe that pain was just sort of like this thing that you feel. But there's, as we know, there's so many layers to it, right? There's the emotional layers, the thoughts, and all this sort of stuff. And I guess I'm going on, but essentially that was sort of like the intersection of mindfulness and physiotherapy for me, right? From a personal lens, I realized that it wasn't just the body that we're dealing with, it's the mind as well. And that has a huge part to play in pain. And that's the missing link for a lot of our patients. And that sort of is what is my inspiration to sort of teach others, professionals as well as patients, to sort of bridge that gap between the mind and the body, mental well-being as well as the physical.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like because you have a platform called Mind Body
Yep.
Horizons, and it sounds like this was what led you to start this platform because you saw a missing piece in physiotherapy, and that's what led, I guess, to you beginning this platform.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And back in physiotherapy, even in school, I felt that there was too much focus and emphasis on the biomechanical model of pain, and there was a whole piece missing. And that was why I created Mind Body Horizons as a sort of bridge and as a sort of a new way of thinking about pain, about health, for our patients, but also for ourselves as physiotherapists. Um, I think it's so important to keep in mind that our mental health is just as important as our physical health. But yeah, that's pretty much why I back in 2018, after the COVID pandemic, is when I really sort of went forward with Mind Body Horizons.
Yeah, I think it's a great mission, and I saw you have a great following on YouTube as well,
Yeah.
with a couple of videos. So
Yeah.
yeah, you almost achieved similar stats like ours, and we had like 1,000 videos or so. So
Oh my
well
gosh,
done.
yeah, thank you. It's an honor. I wasn't expecting it to grow this fast, and yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Time for our sponsor. Elevate your physiotherapy practice with the Physiotutors app, the ultimate resource for clinicians worldwide. Access over 1,000 articles, podcasts, and events, all tailored to your interests and updated daily. Join a community of over 100,000 professionals and engage with cutting-edge tools like our AI clinical assistant for instant, evidence-based answers, and build your own personalized library to organize and access your go-to resources effortlessly. Customize your learning journey with our personalized Discover feed, ensuring you stay at the forefront of physiotherapy. Ready to take your expertise to the next level? Download the Physiotutors app today and become the best clinician you can be.
To continue, maybe to set the stage a little bit, how do you define mindfulness?
Yep.
So mindfulness on itself, and also how do you define it in the context of healthcare?
Absolutely. And those are great questions, because when people hear the word mindfulness, there's so many different things people think about, right? And different definitions. And most people wrongly think that it's about becoming more calm or more zen, relaxed, peaceful, all that sort of stuff. But from a healthcare perspective, mindfulness is way more than that. There's a whole lot to it. The definition that I use in my courses and in my teachings is the one by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. He was sort of like the founder of the very first mindfulness-based stress reduction program in the 1980s. And he was sort of like the pioneer in figuring out how to use mindfulness for people for chronic pain, depression, anxiety, those things like that. And his definition is mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And there's a lot of like key phrases in there that I think are important. Mindfulness is about paying attention, right? So seeing what's there, what's in front of you, and not being on autopilot mode, right? So many of us, we're always on this sort of getting from point A to B without really realizing what that journey is like. So that's paying attention. The second main point of mindfulness is becoming more aware. So not just paying attention, but also taking that in and being aware of like what is actually happening right now. And for physios, it's realizing what we're doing with our patients. For our patients, it's about what am I dealing with this pain or the illness that I'm currently recovering from. And then the third piece is staying in the present moment. And I think we hear that a lot nowadays, stay more present, be more present. But that there's it's essentially about, trying not to get carried away by thoughts about the future, right? Or having so many regrets about the past that we can't really even be there. So that's really what it means. And then the fourth piece of mindfulness, which I think most people neglect, and a lot of even mainstream media don't really even talk about it, is the non-judgmental piece. And what that essentially is can you stay present, aware, pay attention to what in this moment without judging it as good or bad or neutral or whatever it is? Can you just accept it for what it is without trying to add like analysis, layers of dread, worry, or whatever it is? Because our minds are so powerful and we're always thinking. And I think we get caught up in that. And mindfulness is about seeing if you can make a gap from whatever is happening to your analysis. And I think that gap that you create is so powerful because that decides how you respond to it, right? So I guess in the context of healthcare, I think mindfulness is so powerful for helping us reduce our stress levels. And with the current research and the work that I do, they found that one of the best things we can do for our stress is mindfulness meditation, and across the board. There are studies. There was a huge study in 2021. They actually looked at 10 different psychological interventions for improving mental well-being, and they looked at things like mindfulness, positive psychology interventions, cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. And across all those interventions, mindfulness happened to be the most broadly effective in the sense that it helped all different groups, people with physical illnesses, mental illnesses, and the generally healthy population. So it's not just for people who are experiencing anxiety, depression, but even people with physical pain problems and other conditions, they're better able to cope with the stresses that come from there. And then even for the generally healthy population, and I'm talking about physiotherapists in general, I'm just assuming that if we're the generally healthy trying to aid our patients, we can go from this level, like a middle level, to even a higher level where we're more resilient, we can cope with our stresses, pay more attention to what's in front of us. And then with the gap that I mentioned that we create in our lives, we're more wiser and more mindful in the decisions and the acts that we're making. So I guess that was a very long definition of mindfulness, but I think there's a lot. The gist of it is that there's way more to mindfulness than what people think about and what's in the mainstream. I think right up front, people have this like skepticism, like mindfulness is not for me. This is out there. It's hokey pokey, but the research is like crystal clear. There's no denying the current literature in all fields, right? Psychology, rehabilitation, it's everywhere. Like, yeah. And I think it's about time that physiotherapists start to look at it more seriously. And I think they are. It's growing, but I think there can be more done.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, and you mentioned a study. The whole podcast, feel free to throw out author names and references because
absolutely.
we'll all put them in the transcript, so no problem at all.
Yeah.
I just want to expand a little bit on something you referred to there regarding stress and its effect on the body. Can you explain to us, because I think you specialize in burnout to a certain extent as well. Can you explain to us a little bit about how chronic stress affects the body and that connection with pain and burnout?
Absolutely. And I think this is the one thing that sort of is very eye-opening for the people that I work with. It's this sort of link of how chronic stress can lead to worse physical symptoms. And a lot of people kind of know that, but they don't really know it and how that actually happens. So the sort of way I explain it is this sort of looking back into our ancestry, right? Stress is not essentially bad for us. It's a good response. For our ancestors, it was more about like running away from a tiger or whatever, and that sh- that short period of stress was what helped us get away from danger. That whole fight, flight, or freeze mode helped us keep safe, right? But in the modern world, we don't have those kind of dangers present all the time, but we still have this chronic stress. It's this unchecked stress level that goes on and on and on. And what tends to happen is people get stuck in this what we call the negative stress cycle. And I wish I could share my screen, but I have this sort of figure that I've created where there's stress, which leads to kind of thoughts about your stress, right? Like, and I'll give you an example. Let's say a patient has had an injury. They start to have thoughts about that injury, right? You know, when am I going to get better? When am I going to be able to provide for my family? Can I get back to work? Will I ever be pain-free, right? Those are the kind of thoughts that we have. And those are future-based thoughts. Then there are other people that can have past-based thoughts. Like, I was doing so much better before this injury. My life would have been so different if this didn't happen. So those are what we call like automatic thoughts. So stress leads to those automatic thoughts. And then within the world of cognitive behavior therapy, there's this cycle that thoughts follow negative mood and emotion. So based on those thoughts, then you start to, have emotions like I feel sad or down, depressed, low, frustrated, angry, whatever it may be. And then the key piece here is that those thoughts and emotions then lead to what we call maladaptive behaviors. So these are like reflexive instinct behaviors that we all do to respond to our stress and our emotions. So for example, think about a time when you've had a very stressful period. What is your like response to that? So, for some people, it's like they start to eat more. Some people start like smoking more, or they let go of their exercise habits, eating well. Their sleep goes to, a completely off the path, right? So those are what we call like maladaptive behaviors that I'm not to blame the patient or the person going through stress, but it's just our instinct. Like this is what we've done over and over and over throughout our life to keep us safe and healthy. But in that moment, it's actually working against us. And then those behaviors is what lead to those negative physical symptoms. So making your pain worse, making your, cardiovascular system worse. And I'd like to use my own story as for a better example is when I was going through this whole journey of chronic pain, fibromyalgia, I was not like, I was going through the same cycle and getting stuck, and all the behaviors that I was doing was actually making my pain worse, like not exercising or avoiding movement, not eating well, like eating fried food, eating like very highly inflammatory kind of foods was making my pain worse. And I didn't know that at the time, right? But that's the cycle that a lot of people get stuck in. This chronic stress leads to the thoughts, negative emotions, leads to poor behaviors, which leads to worse symptoms, and then that leads to more stress. And this cycle just keeps going. But what mindfulness does, it sort of stops that cycle at that first step of like, when you feel stressed, what are the thoughts that you're having, right? So that's where that filter goes in, where your mindfulness filter, like, let me just stop here, take a pause, and then see what kind of thoughts I'm having without like trying to judge them, without saying like, this is a bad thought or I shouldn't have this thought, but just noticing what kind of thoughts you're having. And that sort of like awareness, that extra attention is what breaks that cycle. So then, like I mentioned that gap before, once you have that awareness, that extra gap makes you realize that the behaviors I'm doing are actually making my symptoms worse. So then that extra time, space can help you do better behaviors that can eventually help your symptoms and your stress levels. So I guess that's sort of like the gist of of mindfulness and how it helps with stress so much, right? Our job as healthcare professionals is to help our patients understand what healthy behaviors are. But even if people are aware of their healthy behaviors, if they're stuck in this cycle, they can't get out of it, right? So there has to be an awareness that a change needs to happen. And that's where mindfulness comes from. Yeah.
Perfect. You already answered our follow-up question. Does interrupt that cycle? And you quickly touched on the application of mindfulness and physiotherapy as well.
Yep.
So if I wanted to integrate mindfulness into my practice tomorrow to support patients dealing with chronic pain,
Right.
how would I go about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's the kind of work that I'm doing at try to figure out how we can integrate this as best we can. And like obviously there's no current literature or guidelines on this. So this is sort of based on my experience as a clinician, as a physiotherapist, and a mindfulness practitioner, right? On how I integrate it. So in the courses that I've done, I've laid out like a stepwise sort of process. And I think the first thing that we can do as physios is to just be aware that we're in the field of helping people as people, as a person. We're not just dealing with a joint or an ankle or a knee or a shoulder, right? I think that's the very first thing we can do as physios to kind of not integrate mindfulness fully, but just become aware that there's way more to pain and the person than the joint or the illness that we're dealing with. That would be step one right off the bat. Just kind of zooming out from the biomechanical and get into the whole biopsychosocial model of thinking and dealing with pain. The second step is I like to ask practitioners to, first of all, read up on mindfulness, what it is, understand it a little bit better. And then the third step is sort of asking your patients, for permission. Can we try something different, right? So first of all, you also have to kind of find the right patient. So you're not doing this with everyone. And that's the mistake I did. When I first did mindfulness, I was like, you need mindfulness. Everyone needs mindfulness. But over time, you sort of realize that certain patients need it more than others, so sort of like figuring out the ideal patient, or the recognizing the potential patients that could benefit. So some of them are, of course, people with chronic illnesses, people who are dealing with chronic stress, chronic pain. You'll hear people say certain phrases that kind of always get my attention, like those thoughts that I mentioned, right? Of, hey, I expected my pain to go away a lot earlier. When will I be able to get back? I was able to do so much before. Those kind of like are sort of like red flags for me that this person is not fully present in their journey. They're very focused on the future or very focused on the past, right? Another sort of patient population I like to target is people with who tell me that they have poor sleep. So they'll say something in their history saying, I'm having sleep troubles, I didn't sleep because of my pain last night. Or could be, they might be dealing with other symptoms, right, that are not helping them sleep. So those are a great patient population that would benefit from mindfulness. There's studies that support mindfulness helping the quality of sleep. So even though it might not improve the quantity, like the number of hours, mindfulness helps us get more out of the whatever sleep that we're getting, which is great. Of course, your patients need to have motivation to improve. You need to have good rapport with your patients. So this is not something like, I wouldn't say your assessment with your patient, you throw in mindfulness right away. This is something you would do like second visit, maybe third visit, depending on how comfortable you are. And usually what I start with is just breathing exercises. So a lot of physios, we know, diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. And I think it's a great segue into breathing techniques, then mindfulness, right? So what I usually do as part of an exercise program, I'll have different, whatever stretches, strengthening programs, core, or whatever it is, cardio. And then at the end of it, I'll always include a 2-minute breathing, and I label it as like a rest break for your body and your mind. And I kind of leave it at that. They do that for a couple of, sessions or a couple of weeks. Then you can include other types of breathing techniques, such as there's a technique called 4-7-8 breathing, which is, inhale to the count of 4, holding for 7, and then exhaling to the count of 8. And then it's something that we have found, and especially in the research world as well, is it's kind of like it triggers your relaxation response. The slower breathing out helps to relax our body, signal our bodies that, hey, like I can just relax. I don't have to be so tense. And then there's other types like box breathing that also kind of go within the breathing techniques section. And then after that is where I would introduce them to, hey, breathing and relaxation can help. Are you open to try something different, something more that would potentially help, right? I never want to kind of shove something in a patient's like, you have to do mindfulness, you have to do meditation. But it's more like asking for permission and gently introducing them. And then I've created handouts. So I provide my patients a handout, like read this, and it's sort of mindfulness for layman's, terminology. Like, this is what mindfulness is, this is what it's not, this is what it can help you with. So when they read it, they kind of realize that, hey, like this can this actually help me with my sleep? Can this help me with my stress levels? And then can this ultimately help me with my pain, right? So once they have those handouts, then as a mindfulness practitioner, I actually do meditation with people in the room, like one-on-one. I'll do a 5-minute meditation with them, and then 10 minutes, and then grow from there. But if you're a physio but you don't have that experience, then you can guide them to using meditation apps. There's tons out there, right? Like Calm, Headspace, and these are beginner level apps that most patients can go and fly with, right? As long as they don't have high levels of depression or other mental health things that you want to be steer clear of. For the general population, they can go and learn from there as well. And then if they're really interested, then I'd like to suggest like a program for them, like a 6, 8, or 10-week mindfulness program in the community. Like, do this would be great for you. Yeah. So I guess that's how I would integrate it. Like, it's like stepwise. Yeah.
Perfect. Great stuff.
Yeah.
So thinking of while we discuss specific techniques for mindfulness in patients, we also know that burnout is a significant challenge for healthcare professionals around the world. Can we apply all the same techniques, or are there any specific strategies you'd recommend for healthcare professionals?
Totally. And when I first started off teaching mindfulness, it was for more patients. But I quickly realized that a lot of physios were coming to me saying like, hey, I think this would help me as well. And there's huge tons of like research and literature to support mindfulness programs for healthcare professionals, right? The hospital system that I work at University Health Network in Toronto, we do these mini mindfulness techniques, and they're a standard practice for everyone, really. And essentially what they are is they're 30-second to 1-minute small mini meditation breaks that you can do throughout your day. So this is something that I would teach to other physios, is see if you can integrate these techniques. And I'll give you some examples. So one of the mini mindfulness technique that I personally really like, they call it the stop and pause. And it follows the acronym STOP. So S is like stop, whatever you're doing. And then, so think about this, like you can do this between patients, right? So you've seen a patient, before you go see your next patient, you take a minute where you stop. So S is for stop, T is take 3 deep breaths. So just stay in that moment, take three 3 breaths. O is for observe. So observe your thoughts, emotions, sensations in your body, like whatever you're feeling without really labeling anything. And then P is proceed wisely or mindfully. So it's sort of that 1 minute break or a pause or a gap to sort of gather yourself, center yourself before you see your next patient. So you're not as a we want to see each patient for who they are and not kind of carry that whole sort of like stress from the first patient to the last patient, right? So I think that's a great way to integrate mini mindfulness. And then there's a whole bunch of other techniques like mindful eating. So during your lunch break, rather than like scarfing food down while you're watching a YouTube video, which is what I do too, I'll be honest.
Definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. But, we try to remind ourselves that this is our time to take a pause and break, nourish our bodies, and eat mindfully, like take in all the senses, take in exactly what you're eating. So that's a great way to integrate it into your clinical lives. And then there's a whole bunch of other techniques. And then if that sort of stuff sort of interests you and you resonate with that, then I would suggest physios to take in a little bit more of training, like online. Try some of those apps yourself. If you're interested, I would suggest you learn more about it. YouTube has a whole ton of like stuff on there. You can go on Physio Network, where I've done a course. This is my shameful plug of the courses I've already done. If you want to learn more about it, on how you can apply it, watch one of those courses. Or and then lifelong, I would say if you can, take a program, a mindfulness, whether that's mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is like the gold standard of stress management and generally healthy living, or any other mindfulness programs that's out there in your local community. And then there's other courses that are online as well that you can take. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, great stuff. Now you're kind of forcing us to record a masterclass at least together.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to do it together, Pai.
Yeah. If you have to plug the competition, then
exactly.
No, it's great.
That's fair. Yeah.
What would you say are some common misconceptions or barriers people face when trying to adapt mindfulness practices? And I know, including myself, I mean, I have it on my list of things that I want to do, but I don't end up doing it. But what are maybe also some misconceptions people have?
Yeah. So I think the first and foremost is this thought that if you want to do mindfulness meditation, it has to be perfect. Like there's steps that you have to follow, and if you don't hit them, then you're doing it wrong. There's really no wrong way of doing mindfulness or meditation, as long as you're aware of what you're doing without judging. And then with that in mind, another common misconception is you have to stop all your thoughts. Like a lot of people tell me, like, I can't do meditation because I can't stop my mind from racing. Like, it keeps going and going and going. I think I'm doing it wrong. But you can't stop your thoughts. It's like asking your heart to stop beating, right? It's your mind is like designed to think. It's gonna think. It's gonna go. It's gonna have thoughts. Your job is to just see what thoughts are coming. And then once you have those thoughts, you go back to a focus point. So in meditation, we usually say, choose a point of focus, whether that's your breath, maybe it's music that you are listening to, maybe it's the feeling of your feet on the floor to ground yourself. Whatever it is, start somewhere and keep going to that focus point over and over again. As soon as your mind starts to wander, which it always will, you just come back to that focus point. And then the way I like to teach it to physios specifically, it's kind of like it's like a bicep curl. Every time your mind like wanders, your job is to come back to your focus point. And each time you do that, you're strengthening your mental muscles, your attention muscles, your ability to stay more present and aware. And the more you repeat that, it just gets easier and easier and easier, right? And before you know it, you could be doing a 10-minute meditation without, realizing where the time went. It takes time. Like I've been practicing meditation for 11 years now. And I still wander. Like, I still go off on like all sorts of tangents. Like, I need to do this, I need to buy this, I need to get this, so
Yeah.
it's normal. So those are some of the barriers that I commonly face. And some people think, again, another huge myth is that people think that it's all about relaxing. Like, I have to feel, if I don't feel relaxed by the end, then I've done it wrong. But that's not true at all. It's like exercise, right? If you work out or if you do any sort of exercise, you don't come out of it feeling like I'm peaceful, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
things hurt, things are uncomfortable. That's exactly what mindfulness is. You can literally compare it to exercise. It's not passive. It's not relaxing. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, but that's where the growth happens, right?
Yeah, and I think actually when you stop and you look at your thoughts, you actually realize how busy your mind really
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Yeah, and that's that awareness, right? That that only happens if you stop and pause. If you just keep going, then you're just on autopilot mode and you don't realize how busy you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I mainly try to apply mindfulness when I'm on a tennis match, and it's funny because
Yeah.
if you see in interviews with like Djokovic,
Yeah.
the guy is like meditating daily, and he's like the
There
the
you go.
mentally toughest player. He's all into mindfulness as
There
well.
you go. Yeah, exactly. And there's like so many other celebrities and athletes that swear by mindfulness that we don't even know about. Like, Michael Jordan was huge. The
Yeah,
Chicago
can see
Bulls,
that.
the whole team was given a mindfulness program during their championship years. And then same applied to the Los Angeles Lakers. Then you have people like Bill Gates, Oprah.
Yeah.
And then something cool I learned recently was Albert Einstein. I did not know about it, but he used to do this sort of like quote unquote meditation where he would try to stop doing everything and he would just let his mind wander, like go to places and do whatever. And that's where his ideas and his intelligence and creativity came from. Is that's what I've read, and I thought that's pretty cool. And it makes sense. Yeah.
I've seen a quote, I think, from him. Yeah.
Sorry, you froze there.
Okay, moving on. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. I think I said I've seen a quote from Einstein about that.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that he had his best ideas when his mind was still
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna try to find that quote. Maybe I'll share it by the end of this call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shrey,
Yeah.
I'm guessing that when you bring up the topic of mindfulness to patients and professionals alike, sometimes you encounter some skepticism.
Yeah.
Like they have some preconceived notions about what it is, and maybe they even tried it before, it didn't work for them. How do you address that skepticism with patients and professionals alike?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I think I take a different strategy for which group I'm dealing with. If it's physios, if it's healthcare professionals, I've done talks with like physicians and different professions as well. For them, it's all about the science, right? They really want to know, like, is this evidence-based? Is this supported by literature? So the skepticism in those domains, I would use all the literature that I've found to show that mindfulness really works for whatever results that they want to gain, right? So for things like burnout, there's a whole ton of research to support that. It makes us more empathetic, with patients, which helps our care. There's research to support that. It helps our sort of levels of anxiety as professionals, as healthcare professionals. We don't talk about that enough. Like, as physios, as health professionals, we go through a lot of stress, right? And wherever you work, we're asked to do more with less, always, right? And that's just the way it is. And we need to have some sort of coping tools and mechanisms to help with that. So that's sort of like the standpoint that I present to health professionals. And I also like to compare it with exercise a lot. Like you've seen me do this on this talk as well, right? Like maybe 30, 40 years ago, if you told somebody that you have to exercise for your health, they'd be like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to exercise. Why would I do that? That's pretty much where we are with mindfulness, right? 20 years from now, our kids are going to be like, hey, you don't meditate? Like, what's wrong? Like, like it's going to get to a point where it's so normal, and it's just it's a good healthy behavior, right? It's the bottom line. It's the best thing we have, at least for now, to help with our stress levels. So why wouldn't we, right? So that's the professional standpoint. That's what I would suggest on how to address their skepticism. And for patients, I think it's a harder job, because when we as physios, when they come to see us, they're expecting us to have some sort of treatment, right? Like whether it be manual therapy, hands-on exercise, they have their thoughts about what a physio should do, right? And mindfulness is not on their list of what, So for patients, I go through my list of, introducing them to breathing techniques, and then giving them examples of, athletes using mindfulness, giving them examples of other celebrities that they might admire who use mindfulness to improve their performance, right? So if you're seeing patients, they're really tap into what they want, right? Like what are their goals? And some of those goals can be addressed through mindfulness in some way or another. So kind of like you have to tweak each patient and the way you present mindfulness in that sense. So there's no standard there. It's just addressing people's skepticism based on who they are and what their goals are. Yeah.
Probably at the end of the day, I mean, you cannot convince everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's
the same with exercise. Yeah,
there you go. Yeah. You just got to plant the seed, and then see what happens. If they do it, they do it. If not, it's on them. Yeah.
Not going to be right for everybody, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Time for our sponsor. Want to stay ahead in physiotherapy? Whether you're looking to master ACL rehab, optimize tendinopathy treatment, or refine your approach to spinal assessment, Physiotutors has you covered with expert-led online courses. Our courses bridge the gap between research and practice, giving you evidence-based strategies you can apply immediately. Learn from world-class instructors at your own pace, anytime, anywhere. Thousands of physios worldwide trust Physiotutors to sharpen their skills and elevate their clinical outcomes. Join them today. Visit physiotutors.com/courses and take your expertise to the next level.
And can you maybe share some success stories with us where mindfulness really transformed the patient's or professional's experience with stress, pain, or burnout?
Totally. Yeah, totally. So I think I'll share a patient's experience first, then I'll share a professional one. But patient experience, one of the first eye-opening experiences that I had was when I did my mindfulness training with patients with chronic pain. So the program that I did is called Mindfulness-Based Chronic Pain Management, and it was led by a physician who was also trained in mindfulness. And there were 30 of us. A few of us were health professionals, maybe 4 or 5, and the rest were patients, real patients with chronic pain. And we did meditations together for, over the span of a couple of months. And the first kind of experience that I saw was through those sort of sessions of practicing meditations, patients, you could literally see their facial expressions change over the span of a couple of weeks, and not even that, even over a session. After we did a meditation together, a patient would say, "Hey, I feel so much better," or they would say things like, "For the last 10 minutes, excuse me, for the last 10 minutes, I forgot about my pain." And that is very, very powerful for people who live with pain like 24/7. To hear that within a 10-minute practice, they were able to think of something and be somewhere else other than their pain is so powerful for the rest of the group, because then all of us were kind of into it. And around the time when I did the training, myself as a professional and somebody who has lived with pain, fibromyalgia pain, I saw a whole transformation from day one to the end of the program. I was much better able to stay within an uncomfortable state. Like sitting, practicing meditation is not easy for 10, 15, 20 minutes if you have pain. And that in itself is like an exercise, right? Like, can you stay with your pain regardless, right, of how it's feeling? And a lot of patients, I saw their demeanor, their body language, their expressions. There was like this community kind of element as well. So that's one a success story, that it's like a kind of like a group success. And then there was one patient that I saw, and I'll just give you a quick kind of synopsis of this patient. She was like a 50-year-old lady with CRPS in her hand. So very, very, very painful, burning, tingling, numbness, all sorts of things in one of her hands. And I remember we had built a very strong rapport together. And in our like 4th or 5th session, I asked her, are you okay if we try a different technique together? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. And we did a breathing meditation together day 1. And she seemed to like it. Like, I feel more relaxed. This feels good. But then the second time, that we met, we did what we call a body scan meditation. And that's one of the more powerful meditations within the pain world. Is when people are in pain, they kind of disassociate that area from their mind, right? Like if somebody has hand pain or whatever area of pain, like their brain has literally kind of cut that out of their picture. Like they don't want to think about it. They've kind of like disassociated from it.
Yeah.
So the body scan is like a tool where you're asking a patient to go to those painful areas, not fully, but kind of like dipping their toes to that area just to see if it's how it feels, right? So the time that I did a body scan meditation with this lady, we were just sitting, and I asked her, let's do I guided her all the way to her hand and into her fingertips, and she was like in agonizing pain, and so much pain. Afterwards the session, I asked her, like, we didn't really do much. You see that we didn't really move your hand. We haven't done a whole lot at all. And that was kind of like an eye-opening moment for her, because she realized that her thoughts alone and her emotions alone were enough to aggravate her pain. So it sort of turned the light bulb on for her that this is not because my hand is damaged or there's something wrong in there. Her system is sensitive, right? And then I educated her on the whole pain science world along with the mindfulness, and I think we made like huge strides. Like she was eventually like able to go back to work, because she was a receptionist, so you need to do a lot of typing and mouse work, and she was able to get back to that over. It took many months. But that was a patient success story that I'll never forget, because nothing else was working. Sorry, that's a lot of talking that I just did. And then
No, perfect. Yeah, it's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah, and then from a professional and a personal example, I'd like to use my example, right? Like in university, I was an anxious, stressed out, in pain kid. I had a lot of like trouble sort of trying to fit in, but also figuring out like what I wanted to do, overall. And through the last like 10 to 12 years, mindfulness has sort of been like my pillar. And the way I practice meditation it doesn't have to be your typical like sitting down, breathing, formal meditation. What I do is I do a lot of mindful movement meditation. So I should have mentioned this earlier, but for physios, a lot of us like to move and, use our bodies. So the mindfulness movement meditation is really like intentionally, purposefully moving your body, stretching your body in comfortable ways without judging, right? So that's what I do on a daily and nightly basis, and that has been like just night and day for me in terms of my pain, in terms of my stress levels, my sleep. My sleep has improved so much just because of that, and I feel more confident, more alert throughout the day, more present with my patients, better able to cope with the ups and downs of life and physiotherapy, clinical world, as whatever it gives me. So I'd like to say that's a success story.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I agree.
Yeah, and that's just so taking your normal stretching routine or your normal movement routine and moving through it with a different perspective mentally on it. Is that your
Yeah, it's essentially you're doing it where you're so focused on the sensations, the stretch or whatever you're feeling, that rather than using your breath as the focus point, you're using the sensations of your body as a focus point for your meditation. But there's another kind of added element to that, if you want to turn it into a mindfulness practice, is being non-judgmental about whatever is coming to you in that moment for whatever time you're practicing. So that's what differentiates, because it would kind of sound like yoga for somebody, right? Like, what's the difference between yoga and mindfulness then, right? Because you're just stretching and breathing. But with yoga, there's this kind of a regimen, and don't get me wrong, I love yoga, I do it all the time too, but there's this kind of like regimen of like, having a perfect pose or trying to attain a certain position. Within mindfulness movement meditation, you're doing whatever your body allows you to do. There's no need to be perfect, and there's no need to strive for something, right? That's the difference. And that's a huge kind of principle in mindfulness, right? Like we talked about the whole non-judgmental, like being okay with the good, the bad, the ugly. That's what mindfulness movement is about, just being not trying to strive for anything. Like you're not trying to gain anything out of it. It just, you're doing it because you're doing it. That's it. And end of story. Yeah.
okay? I think we're coming towards the end of
We
our
are.
time for this podcast.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on, or one last message you want to leave with everybody before we finish up?
Sorry, I would like to say that Physiotutors in essence you guys were like amazing throughout university for me, and I in the future I do hope we can do a course together. But regardless, you guys have been like such an inspiration for physios like myself, and I know a lot of friends and a lot of doctors I work with too. They're all about learning the skills and the tests from Physiotutors. So you guys are awesome.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. And then one more thing I'd like to share. It's just a quote that I think it stuck with me for a long time, and I'd like to share it with everyone. But it's by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. He says, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf." And I think that kind of tells us a whole lot about life, and as clinicians as well, that there's always going to be ups and downs, but can you learn how to find a raft or a surfboard or something that can keep you afloat regardless of whether you have ups or downs? And for me, that's what mindfulness has been. And I hope that is the thing for other people as well.
Yeah, that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
And but before I round up, pretty sure that people are going to ask us for book recommendations, and you already recommended the book by I think that's like the original, right, by John Kabat-Zinn.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe one or two other book recommendations for people who would like to read up on mindfulness?
Yeah, totally. So the So Dr. John Kabat-Zinn was kind of like the Western pioneer of mindfulness. He turned it, so any of his books are great. I find them to be very complex and lengthy. They're really good, but they're very kind of dense. You can't go wrong with those. There's a really good book by the Headspace founder. He explains mindfulness in an easier way. But then if you want the true sort of mindfulness, then you can't look, you can't forget the Eastern side. That's where it originally comes from, right? The Eastern traditions. That's where mindfulness originally originates. And Thich Nhat Hanh, he was a Vietnamese monk. He's credited to be kind of like the founding father of mindfulness in today's world. Basically, what he did was he took the teachings of Buddhism, where mindfulness and other traditions come from, and then he made it easy to understand for the everyday person. And a lot of his books, I would say, are great to learn about true meditation and mindfulness. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to get in touch or learn more about you?
I would say I used to do a lot of stuff on Instagram. You can still find me on there, but YouTube is where I'm focusing more on. So if you want to find me, you can find me on YouTube, LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Shrey Vazir, and all the contact info should be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, Shrey, thank you so much for your time and insights, and it was a pleasure to have you on.
Definitely.
And
likewise, thank you so much.
For everyone, it was an honor to have you for sure. And for everyone out there, thanks a lot for listening to this episode, and to listen to this and other episodes in your own language, including German, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Dutch. Download our new and free Physiotutors app. And additionally, you can access the transcript and infographic of this episode, find more useful physio content. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And also consider leaving a review if you really enjoyed it. And with this being said, this was Kai.
And Steve.
Yes, for Physiotutors. And we'll talk to you in another episode. Bye.